Welcome to Sunny Brands, the podcast that highlights the companies that make the world a better place. I'm Eliezer Reese, founder of Odd Notion, a branding agency and proud B Corp here in Portland, Oregon. And here are my co-hosts.
Hi, this is Rebecca, CEO and co-founder of the Impact Collective, also a certified B Corp in Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Sarah. I am the other co-founder of the Impact Collective.
I'm excited because we're talking today to Anyeley Hallová, founder of Adre, a real estate development firm in Portland. I was surprised by her incredibly wide variety of different skills and expertise and background.
Yeah, I know Rebecca and I have both been pretty big fangirls of Anyeley, if I can just admit that. She's an incredible powerhouse in everything that she does. And I also am so impressed with the way she shows up in the community. She has a really powerful voice, and I love everything that she stands for.
For me, what really was, I'm not going to spoil it, but kind of, her really being underlooked as a Black woman and being a business owner, even though with her accreditations and all the schooling that she's had, she still had to wrestle with being underlooked and understated, even though she has cred.
The Impact Collective has been working with Adre for the last couple months on their journey towards B Corp certification, and it's been so awesome to see that their outsides match their insides. Everything that they're putting together to make their company more purposeful and just to have longevity in their purpose is really awesome. We're so grateful to have them as part of our local Portland community.
Let's dive in. Sarah, tell us who we have in the show.
Super excited. We've got Anyeley Hallová, CEO and founder of Adre, a real estate development company here in Portland. She's going to share more with us about her purpose-driven journey and how that's been translating into founding her own organization. So super excited to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. All right. So I heard your story a little bit once during an internal meeting situation, and I was so inspired by your story. So I think it would be great for everybody listening. Like, tell us where you're from, where you went to school, plural, and yeah, just how did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, so I grew up in South Florida. My dad's from Ghana and my mom's from Ohio. And when I was around middle school, my family moved to northern Nigeria. And I think that was like a real turning point for me with regard to, I'd traveled all around the world a lot as a kid, but really being in a different country, living in a different context, seeing different types of social and environmental issues. By the time I got to applying to college, I was really like reflecting on like, what do I want to do with my life? And really a lot of those early childhood stories, memories, and experiences really influenced the way I see the world. And so I also grew up going to Disney World a lot. And I fell in love with Epcot and specifically this ride called Living with the Land. And it was actually a boat ride through a hydroponic garden. And I took my kids there like a couple years ago and they were like, Mom, you're such a nerd. After seeing the whole Disney World, can't believe this was your favorite ride. But really it was I started to feel a love for agriculture, for food production, for feeding people, for thinking about water resources and all these things. And so when I applied to college, I went to undergrad at Cornell University. I was actually in the ag engineering department and my goal was to feed the world. I can go on in my journey. So around that time, I went to Costa Rica. I did a study abroad with a program called the School for Field Studies. And this is in like the mid 90s. And I did a program called Sustainable Development. And I really enjoyed the program because it was diving into different manufacturing, different agricultural productions, and really evaluating businesses based on the three elements of sustainability. So social equity, environmental sustainability, and economic prosperity. And so I had a very early on high education with real life experience in Costa Rica studying that. and then came back to the United States. And everything after that was my journey to be like, I want to do sustainable development. And this is prior to the word sustainable being in the general, vocabulary of people. And so my journey, my rest of my education journey was just trying to find that. And so I did an internship at the South Florida Water Management District. And somebody there was like, I think city planners do that. And so I went and applied to MIT and started off in the environmental policy department of the planning school, and quickly switched to city design and development. Got the opportunity to travel to many different places in the world, to China, to Germany, do all of these really interesting practical studios. I loved education, I guess, a lot.
You still do.
I still do. And decided to continue on. And I had a choice. Did I want to do architecture, or did I want to do landscape architecture and urban design? I really wanted to do urban design, but you need a design background to do that. And so the funny part about, the fact I'm a real estate developer now is that I had no interest in actual buildings. And so
that's a problem.
I know. And some of my college friends are like, wait a minute, as I recall. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So I went on to study landscape architecture at Harvard and got a degree there. Pretty much came out feeling way overeducated. But started working in Atlanta for a landscape architecture firm, which at the time was the largest in the world, and started doing international work. I did a lot of master plans for downtown cities in the Caribbean, very specific, and probably would have stayed in that profession if not starting to have developers as clients. And my clients at the time were like, yeah, we're interested in this thing called environmental sustainability. And I was like, me too. But then when it came down to it, they started, removing those parts of the project. And it was a very specific day, a specific client. I kind of looked at him and said to myself, I think I could be that guy. I want to, switch professions. And so when I moved to Portland, I switched professions.
Wow. So, yeah, this is one of the things that I was tripping about when I was listening to your story first time. So, not a civil engineer, not an architect, not a builder. So today, if I were to hire you,
yes,
what are you helping me do?
Yes. So real estate developers essentially make projects happen. That's the best way to describe it. And another way that people don't usually describe themselves, but I think it's very helpful, is that we manage people's money. So in the case of, investors, we might take their money and essentially hire the whole team, hire the architect, the contractor, all the consultants that come along with the team, help acquire a piece of land, get building permits through. And so we're essentially like a movie director in the sense that we are coordinating the film at the end. In our case, it's the building at the end. And we're getting all the right parties. In the case of a movie, it might be an actor or, the people who are doing film and all that. Right. But in our case, it's the consultants that make the project happen. And so we do all of that. And then at the end, when the project's done, we help hire a property manager to manage it.
Gotcha.
And then we manage all the financial metrics, the cash flow, all of those things. So each project in itself is a company, and we're managing that company or that building to certain performance metrics, be they financial return, or in the case of mission-oriented development, it might be how many people are you serving, or what's the goal of the nonprofit or the business that's in the building. So different ways to measure the end result, but the idea is shepherding a project from beginning to end.
Gotcha. And so since you're sitting in that seat, what is the unique perspective that you're bringing to the work, giving all the schooling and all the things and all the perspectives and all the cultures and all the places that you've lived? What's the thing that you bring to the table when it comes to helping an organization plan a development? Yeah.
So when I was in school, specifically planning school, when you read about things that deal with developers, they're always the bad guy. They're always the evil guy in the story. It's always a guy. And so I had no affinity to that. What it did provide for me is the idea of could things be better? Once I learned about the field, specifically the power of the field to direct the goals of the project, right? Because really at the end of the day, the developer was saying, yeah, we're going to do that, or no, we're not going to do that. And so the perspectives I bring through all my experiences, my lived experience as a Black woman, are really about being on the outside of the profession. If you count all of the Hispanic and all of the Black developers in the U.S., put those two together, they make up less than 1% of real estate developers in the United States. So real estate development deals with land, and communities of color haven't had the ability to access or have been stripped of the power of land. It deals with investment, and communities of color haven't had the opportunity to get loans from banks. So it deals a lot with the power and the wealth creation that has created the United States, and a lot of the wealth that has been stripped from communities of color. So kind of being on the outside, being a person who cares about these issues, learning the profession, learning the craft over many years, the perspective I bring is how can we do things better? How can we be more catalytic when it comes to addressing this wealth inequality, addressing the lack of spaces in communities of color? And so really my lived experience perspective, and then training with all that schooling. Not most developers don't come from the backgrounds that I mentioned, being, landscape architecture or city planning or environmental sciences. And so, but those are really the things that are important if you want to think about a sustainable project. And so I'm really trying to hopefully be on the forefront of a whole new wave of socially responsible development.
Yeah. I recently put a post out on LinkedIn about my journey of why I started out Notion, and you commented and you reshared. You were very kind to reshare. And you posted something along the lines of like similar reason for why you started Adre. Can you tell folks why did you start it?
I mean, people are surprised to hear from me that I never planned to be a business owner. That was not a goal in my life. And so it's been a journey to get there. As part of that journey is dealing with the market conditions and like having a job and being laid off from a job and what am I going to do? And kind of, I don't want to say falling into business ownership, but kind of falling into that and then realizing really that's the place that I wanted to be. And so it's very correlated to the time, like anybody, to the events of your time. And my passion has always been in sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I don't mean environmental, I mean social and environmental. And really 2020 and the events of Black Lives Matter was there were three things happening actually. One is in my previous company, I had just finished a building for Meyer Memorial Trust, which is a local Portland foundation that's very vested in like racial equality, social justice, feminism. So I just finished an awesome building for them. And that was kind of like, at least as far in my career, like the ultimate project, And the project after that was sort of my normal development project. And I was like, I don't know if I can just do a normal project right now. So that was one thing. The second one was the social justice protests in Portland, which all of us not only witnessed, but many of us participated in. So that was very compelling. And then the third one was I was very involved in policy at the state level around housing equity and thinking about equitable distributions of housing, thinking about communities that have been left out of, getting fair and equitable housing. And so at that moment in 2020, I really was like, okay, I'm using my volunteer time to do kind of my passions around social equity, and I'm using my work time to do passions around environmental, like building construction and all that. What if I created a company that merged those where I could, pour all my energy into that? And so similar to you, 2020, and my comment was, how many companies formed in 2020?
It's basically like I needed a vehicle that, at least for me, I don't know about y'all, but January, everybody wants to go back to the gym and like get in shape, and they start going to the gym and then they fizzle out.
Yeah.
And it's because, at least for me, it's just hard to integrate a new rhythm practice into my life. So I felt like I needed something that forced me to show up. And what better way, at least for me, I'm so passionate about business, that to integrate it into my own business. So I'm forced, like if I'm going to work, I'm going to do that because that's what I built.
It's most of your time spent at work.
So I didn't want to like tag in on another additional thing.
Yeah.
The Impact Collective was also formed in 2020.
No way.
Yes.
As a reaction to previous experiences in corporate America that we thought could be different. So,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
How
2020
convenient.
business
It's good company
is
we're all
the
in.
way of the future. Yeah.
And I have at least one client that was also formed in 2020 that's a Black woman-owned company. So
That's awesome.
there's quite a few.
My
of us.
last question for you is, what has it been like being a Black woman doing what you're doing?
That's an hour
I know.
other podcast.
Say it in 2 minutes.
Wow. I was fortunate when I got into development. I don't think I could have gotten it any other way though. Was that I came into a company here in Portland that was very focused on environmental sustainability. And strangely enough, like right when I came in, they were coming up with like a metric or an indicator for how to judge a project and score it, which actually ended up getting a patent that I'm on. And I was in charge of thinking about the social equity part of it. So I've had this from then even till today. I was thinking about it in a different context, is how can you come up with like a metric, just like the LEED rating system, which is part of the U.S. Green Building Council. We've done really well in the last 30 years on coming with scoring when it comes to environmental sustainability, but not on the social equity part. So I wanted to say that I feel like my journey has been better than what it could be for somebody else being a Black woman. I think one of the hard parts is, even in my last partnership that I was in, no matter how many times I told people I'm a real estate developer, I do real estate development, you know, how many times can I say the word development? I would still get, what do you do here? And are you in charge of? And can you get me the coffee? But no, can you make an appointment?
Scorching moment.
Scorcher.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is common for women.
Yeah.
And even outward facing, the projects I was doing, people didn't really understand that I was doing them. And so I feel like I've had it really great in some ways because I've been able to get to where I am. But through that process, I've seen all the barriers. I've overcome all the challenges. And I would say that extends to my educational experience too.
Right.
Because in many of those settings, specifically in the design world, I was like one Black person in the landscape architecture program at Harvard for the 3 years that I was there. And so when you're such a minority, and the focus of the program, the company, the whatever I'm in, isn't on issues, you know, of community of color, that makes you're just kind of fighting a system and a wall. One of the awesome parts about being an owner in your own real estate development company is that you can create the teams. You know, I can bring the architects and the contractors and all the people that care about these issues. So in some ways, a lot of the complaints I hear from people who are working for companies, I'm like, oh, I don't have that because I create the team. You know, I don't have that problem. So I've been fortunate in some ways, but it's been a steep hill that I've climbed in many times alone, in the sense of not with a cohort of people coming with me.
That's amazing. I think now we want to give people a sneak peek into where you're headed.
Yes.
And you're in the middle of becoming a B Corp.
Yes.
And these ladies are helping you do
They are.
that.
Yeah. That's why I should have known that they started.
There's some values alignment there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's talk about it. How did you decide B Corp? And, you know, now you're leading a company, you get to make all the decisions. I'm very interested in like how your decision making has changed, but maybe start with like the decision to become B Corp certified.
I was going to kind of roll back a little. I didn't know this till, you know, you get older and then you look back and you're like, oh, this all makes sense. I didn't know when I would go into various companies, I would start doing things about operations. I just was like, the server needs to be organized better. Can I take that project on? This needs to get done. We need procedures. And it's only until recently that I took this like assessment with one of these fellowships that I'm in that was like, if you're an entrepreneur, operator, or creative, they're like, you're a operator.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense about what I gravitate toward. So I've also been a big proponent of LEED certification, for example, which is affiliated with development, because I'm like, if you don't have a set of, like, even me who cares about these issues, if I don't have a set of rules or guiding posts at every decision, I might make the cheaper decision. I might make the less less environmentally responsible or social responsible decision. Yeah. And so I don't believe in, we do this, believe us. I'm like, we need some metrics, some third-party measurements, something like that. So I've always been like that kind of person. And I failed to mention, I'm the chair of the board of the U.S. Green Building Council right now. So I am in the circles of thinking about like, how do you bring equity into scoring within that context? So I'm well in that world. So when I started the company, I knew I needed something. Was it going to be this certification or that one? And I came to the conclusion, and I like robust things, as you can tell from my education. And so this seemed like the most robust version of that could indicate, we're not greenwashing, we're not equity washing. These are the things we're actually doing.
And I'm curious, so you're in the middle of it. Like, what's that like? Talk a little bit about that. Like, you're right in the middle of it.
I think there was one most surprising thing that happened that made, you guys know what it is, that made me so excited, which is I had these things I called side gigs. So I was like, we're doing this awesome work, which is mission oriented, by the way. So the development I do right now is working with nonprofits to deliver their real estate projects. So I was already doing that, but then I had these things called side gigs. That's literally what I called it, which were like, we're going to partner with this educational institution and offer this studio, or we're going to use one of our sites as the student design competition for this thing or another. We're going to write a book. We'll talk about my book later. And it felt like, almost like volunteer things that we did. And then when we got to the B Corporation part of it, I realized, all our side gigs are actually the things that B Corporation really cares about. Like we're going to get credit for things that we're going to do naturally anyway. Yeah. So ways to start to reframe these kind of one-off things that we did into categories of things that we do. And then ensure that on each of our projects, we're thinking about what are we doing on this one? What are we doing on that one? So I think that was the most surprising part that we're super excited about.
I love that.
That's something that I know Eleazar experienced too. There was like the specific word that you used about credit, right? Of having credit for the things that you're doing. And there's something that feels like, especially from your story, that resonates with our story and Eleazar's story, which is like, there's a responsibility that I know I feel coming from a certain background and starting my own business to make things different, to see something done differently, that I feel like there's a responsibility to share that and to be a leader in that space. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about I don't know, maybe if this is jumping ahead, but like in the real estate development world, like, you've had your organization for a few years, you're pursuing B Corp, you're doing all these awesome projects. Like, what is your outlook on the industry?
Yeah. I was fortunate to be a part of a movement within the building industry prior to this movement that I'm trying to start now, which is called the mass timber movement. And so in my last company that I was a partner in, we actually won a competition from the U.S. Department of Agriculture called the U.S. Tallwood Building Prize. And a Portland company won it and a New York company won it. And essentially our task was build the first high-rise made out of wood in the United States. That was the task. It had been happening in Europe and happening in Canada, but not in the U.S., Lots of barriers to make that happen: fire testing, seismic testing, acoustic testing. And essentially our team was the first to do it. And we did it here in Oregon. We got it permitted. The results from that ended up going to change the International Building Code to essentially allow for other developers to just do it without all the things that we did.
Absolutely wild.
So super successful R&D project. I poured my life, 4 years of my life, maybe more, into that project. Because really the mass timber was thinking about environmental sustainability 2.0, and really thinking about embodied carbon in building and where do our materials come from and how do we support local economies. So all this awesome stuff that I believed in, but this is a specific solution. It went from 0 manufacturers in the United States. When we started that project, there were 0 manufacturers, and we're like, we're going to build this out of all, U.S. wood. This is a wrong stat, but last time I looked, I think it was 15 manufacturers. We had 3,000 people at a international mass timber conference here in Portland. Wow. You can see our new airport is the best in the United States, I would say.
Yeah.
To see a movement start and be where it is in such a short time, that was truly inspiring to me. And so one of my motivations for starting the company is, if I could just do that with that, why can't I what if I focus on the Black community? What if I focus on communities of color and created equally that project didn't even get built. It's not a physically built project, but it had that much impact. What if I could, and I want to build my projects. What if I could create equally catalytic projects in different product categories is the best way to describe it. And I can say more later, but that is very inspiring, I think. Hopefully I answered your question.
It sounds like you feel positive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Change is possible.
Yes. Change is possible in a short amount of time. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I think going back to the idea of like, these are things that you were already doing, the side things that you were already doing on the side. That's kind of how I felt with Dream Night, which is this pro bono initiative that we have where we help minority-led businesses with creative services. I was already doing that with my homies. Like, I was already doing that to help my friends. So it was just like, oh, I can measure this? Oh,
yeah.
I get brownie points for that? Like, okay, great. Like, let's make this legit.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of the times it's right in front of you. The way that you can make a difference is like right there.
Yeah.
And the impact is happening. And I was just at this session right before I came here. There was impact investors talking about how to create impact, how to measure, literally. And they were saying, like, if you don't, what you don't measure, you don't create,
Yeah.
So you might have been doing it. And this is also a thing with a growing team. I was like, okay, I'm always going to think about these things. I'm always going to do that. But what if I have another employee and another employee? How do I translate this system or ideas to the next person? And this process is going to make us, whether, I don't say make us, we've decided to do as a part of this process to have like checklists or scorecards so that anybody coming into the company can quickly say, we do this, this, and this, rather than it just being like, Anyeley said, let's do this.
Right.
Yeah. It protects your purpose. Yeah. We were talking about that in our last episode, like how to protect your purpose long term. We were talking about Patagonia and how they do that in terms of their governance. But it's not just governance, it's also the systems you put in place, right? And the checklists that you're talking about. But I am curious also about governance. Have you thought about how to make sure the decision making beyond you is still in line with your purpose? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. I did this, Goldman Sachs has this 10,000 small businesses program. And the first thing they make you do when you join the program is tell us your exit strategy. Like literally the first thing you do. And I was like, I just started my company. I was like, it was so painful. And then at the end of the program, they make you do it again. And you're like, oh, I feel like I can really digest this.
Interesting.
And so I'd actually heard about Patagonia's trust structure and all that. And so, it's a very interesting process to make you think about the end.
Yeah.
And then kind of backcast almost. What do you want to do to get to that end?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know.
How do you think about the end?
Because this is what I've realized about the operations person. Because I'm an operations person, I also didn't name the company after myself, which most developers do. Specifically because I like this idea of a continuing, either this company or the idea of it.
Yeah.
And I failed to mention my company's called Adre, which actually means the number 7 in the Ewe language, which is my dad's side comes from. And so the idea of 7 generations, which is a Native American concept, and then the connection to my cultural heritage. And so I'd already been thinking in this kind of long-term way, even though I'm a little bit of actually a short-term thinker when it comes to goals. So I would like this to live on in this iteration or in concept.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. So before we started the Impact Collective, I worked at like early stage tech startups for 6 or 7 years, and the early stage, like employee number 1 or 2, and the purpose of those businesses was to increase the individual wealth of their already wealthy, primarily white male investors, and to exit, right? For acquisition or some kind of merger. And it was always such a I remember there was a question, and I feel like, I don't know, I say this sometimes, but I don't think any of the founders of those companies are going to listen to this podcast. And if they do, sorry. But it's like, I remember having a conversation one time about, and and the question was like, do you think customers would pay more for this feature? And I was like, I wish the question was like, what feature could we build that would provide more value to our customers? But that wasn't the purpose of the organization, right? And so it's interesting. I'm curious, like what, I know, and you're a part of so many of these different, like the Tory Burch and the Goldman Sachs and all of these different types of like fellowships and organizations. Like, how did it feel to be asked that question? And how, like, when you got to the end of it, like, how did your answer change?
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting part is the various folks in the program. Some of them had a company for 15 years and hadn't figured that out, right? Versus, so I felt ahead of the game in that sense, because we were all dealing with that issue. And tell me more about the question.
Just like, is it something you had thought about before? Like if we don't talk about an exit strategy for the Impact Collective, because I think I want the Impact Collective to be the rest of my life and I want it to live on after us. There's not this like endpoint to it, right? And so, did it, I guess the question is sort of like, it sounds like you had this perpetuity of the purpose of the organization. Did it change how you thought about that? Or did it solidify you feeling like, I just want this to live on, beyond me?
One of the things I forgot to mention, this happens in architecture firms, but also real estate development firms, is a lot of times they end with the founder ending. Yeah. Because the founder can't let go of the company. Yeah. And so really hard to transition. So that's just similar to what you said, bringing I don't want to say the baggage of your previous companies, but seeing things in the other places that you worked that you were like, God, I wish that could change. One of those was, could that cycle, like, could that normal way of behaving change? And specifically with the Goldman Sachs program, they're all about working on the business instead of in the business, and actually creating a separation between your emotional self, which we're all passionate about why we started, from the actual business ability. Literally, could I walk away and this business still thrive? And so I think between that and this idea of like, I started thinking about my kids because that was one of the choices. They're like, do your kids want to inherit? One of the choices was it dies with me. And they were like, nobody better click that option, and so it's just being real. Like, we don't live forever. Like, what do you want to do with this thing? And so I think it just put me in a different mindset. I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
My kids are 9 and 14.
Like, here's your life
They've
plan.
heard a lot about development over the years. They've been to all the construction sites. They've been in all the photo shoots. Do you like development?
I do think it's for me, what comes up is legacy. Yeah. The conversation of legacy really forces you to think about purpose for whatever reason. Because you're not taking it with you, and if you're staying, what is it staying to do? Yeah. So that's brilliant. So I might take that for our brand strategy sessions.
This episode is coming to you from the studios at Land, Portland's creative hub blending Latin American craftsmanship with Pacific Northwest design. Explore handmade rugs and homeware from Oaxaca and discover a space where art meets community with one of our hands-on workshops. Visit us in Old Town in Portland, Oregon, or online at land.org. That's LANDDD.org. And at land_org on Instagram. That's at LANDDD_org on Instagram. Land, where design tells a story.
I feel like this is the time for me to talk about my book.
It's time to talk about your book.
Talking about legacy. I failed to add author to your intro.
So thinking about legacy, I decided to write a kid's book about real estate development, and that's through the publisher A Kid's Book About. So they have different topics on their series, and they're usually difficult topics to talk to about kids, but that parents want to introduce. So the first one they had was A Kid's Book About Racism. Mine could involve that topic. And so one of the things I wanted to do was kind of peel back the curtain, unveil, take away the secrecy of the profession, because it's a very mysterious, on purpose, right? You don't know what it is. It's too complicated for you to understand. to kind of simplify it to its most basic form. And it's been helpful then to explain now what is development. Somebody said, that's the best description I've ever heard. And I was like, well, I just wrote a kid's book about it. I hope so. But two things. I didn't think about this when I wrote it, really, but now I think about it a lot. One is I really wanted to encourage young kids of color to see themselves potentially. This is their future. The second one is I wanted to encourage kids and parents who are not of color to think about the potential of the profession to be different. And so it's from the lens of social equity and environmental sustainability, and really touches a little bit on the history. Talks about how we're the bad guys usually, because we literally are usually, and just tries to have a higher calling for the profession. And so I'm really excited to get it out there. But a lot of parents, a lot of people in the profession have written me and said, "Thank you for writing this book. Now my parents understand what I do, or now my kids understand what I do." So
I love that. We need
a kids book about social impact strategy.
But both of you will be learning shortly a lot. We're coming up with this almost like theory of change that we're developing, and we've obviously kind of always been interested in education by the people I brought into the company. And so this is like our lower years version of that. Our higher years, we did, me and another, one of my former classmates actually at Harvard, taught a studio at Harvard Graduate School Design on trauma-informed design. And so trying to, I had a lot of issues with wanting certain topics to be in my education, talking about the people, focus on people, basically, and the environment. And that wasn't there when I went there. And so to be able to be in the space to now be the professor, to be like, finally I can bring the topics that I wanted. And students that are coming into these higher education, are demanding these things. So I was going to say, this is a sample of kind of like the lower years version. And then we have, higher ed versions.
And shout out to Jelani Memory, which is on season 1, episode 1.
Oh,
He created a kids company, which is the company that published your book.
Yes.
And they were just acquired, right?
Yes, they did.
By DK.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sort of thinking about like impact storytelling and your team and the longevity of your organization. So you are so the face of Adre, and you're so present in the community and out there. Do you think about like what it looks like when your team is twice the size or 3 times the size? Like, I guess I don't know, it's sort of a vague question, but like as you grow your team and as like maybe Anyeley steps a little bit more in the background and Adre steps a little bit more to the foreground, like when you think about your brand and the story of it, what do you think about?
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have about that?
That's one of the reasons we're doing all these procedures and processes to kind of get everybody on board. Also, when I started the company, I had like kind of 2 choices. One is bring people who know about everything about real estate development, but have no ties to social equity or environmental sustainability, or bring people that had no ties to real estate development. It's hard. I mean, how many people exist like me, right? And I made the choice to go with values and essentially hire folks that had different skill sets that contribute to the built environment, but not necessarily all the development skill sets, and really have them work as a team to realize those. Also, a lot of my team members have roles within the community. So one of my team members is on the design review commission at the city. Other ones have started a nonprofit that was really about BIPOC youth and bringing them in. So each of them are leaders in their own right in community. And so that was a very deliberate choice that I made. And then really putting the effort into training them in the skills that they didn't necessarily have. And putting that money in there versus saying like, I have to have somebody who has like all these skills, but then dropping what's most important to the company. I think I also realized that the people that were hiring us were expecting us to come with that. And I can't be the only person that has that. And so that's proven out really well with our clients to have that. And you were talking about the future again.
Yeah. But it sounds like, it's funny because this does, so many of the things you're talking about tie back to our first episode about Patagonia. One of the things that they had in terms of like their hiring ethos was that they hired their customers, right? They hired people who had like the values, because they said it's easier to teach like a a rock climbing dirtbag who cares about the environment how to file invoices than vice versa. And they seem to have been doing pretty good.
Yes.
So I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. And one of the things that the company that I started working with when I first moved to Portland, they made us read Patagonia, the book that they wrote about the company. So sometimes I realize like these things over the years have been infusing in my brain, whether I realize it or not. And so it's nice to come feeling a little full circle, but now I kind of want to push the gas and like accelerate it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about, you have a very inspiring purpose, and you even started with like, I want to feed the world. And you have a lot of things that you care about, which is amazing. And there's like a million ways you could make an impact in those areas. So I'm really curious how you make decisions about which projects to take on or where to focus your efforts.
That's a great question. I'm the kind of person I find a lot of things interesting.
I could tell.
So, and I feel like I can almost make something out of anything, if that makes sense. So we're actually in the process of coming up with, based on these things that we realized were side gigs, we're like, oh, that's actually our values. Right. That's what we are trying to do. That can we use, we have some base things that we do in every project. So we want it to be environmentally resilient. We want it to be have equitable outcomes. We want it to be economically viable. And then thinking about innovation, education, and arts and culture. Those are what we're coming up with as being our categories for our side gigs. We were doing that to think about a B Corp, and we were doing it for some other reason, and then suddenly looked at it and went, well, maybe that's the criteria for how we choose projects. Right?
I love it.
Because I was sort of saying, maybe we have arts and culture on one and maybe another one doesn't have it. And then we're like, well, when we essentially took each of our projects and tested it with this new metrics that we have and realized like all of our projects touch on this, or we could easily let it touch on that. And so that might become the criteria. But then there's a whole other set of criteria. Like, do we only want to stay in Oregon? Do we want to go national? I think a struggle with our concept is that we ideally want to serve communities of color. And they're also the ones that don't have land ownership, money. So how does that work? So I think one of the most surprising parts about the company is I didn't think we'd become grant writers. But we are. Because we interact with the client, we suddenly realize, okay, they really need our expertise when it comes about writing about buildings, writing about sustainability, equity in relation to buildings. And so we've actually, I think we're $20+ million right now on grants that we've helped our clients get through writing.
Incredible.
Yes, I love that.
And the way I see it is, we're getting that money and we're bringing it into communities of color. Right. And in another market rate scenario, you would be bringing investors to bring to a community that may just extract from the community, right? May not contribute. What if you could bring that same dollars in to something that contributes to community? I often think about like the clients that we work with, like should not be the ones paying for the work that we're doing. Which is how we met you. Our work with you is funded by a grant also, which I'm like, if that could be the way it works with every client, because then we don't have to cut things out. We can work with you the way that we know what you need, right? And that's what I'm noodling on, is like how to make that more systemic. And that also came from the fact that were getting millions of dollars for our clients and went, well, what if we turn our grant writing on ourselves? So what could we do with that? So we're already at, I think, 200,000 in grants that we've written for ourselves.
Wow.
And so, this is a good story. I'll tell you a story. So when I wanted to go to Cornell, Ivy League education, my family didn't have the money to pay for that. And so my mom essentially helped me source, I don't even remember how much, it was like 100 and something scholarships.
Oh, wow.
And she was basically going to apply. And every time I complained, she would be like, is 1 hour of your time worth $10,000? And I'd be like, oh, fine. And then I'd write my 1 hour,
Wow.
She always, correlated it. And so I think I ended up getting 7 or 10 scholarships that funded my Cornell education that I essentially wrote grants when I was 18.
That's incredible.
It was such a painful exercise, right? And then fast forward, my framework project, the one that was the tall, high, wood building, I was in need of money to get it going, and I started writing grants. And I raised, my grant writing, I raised $1.7 million for that project.
Wild.
So I've sort of had to do these things out of necessity. Mm-hmm. And so then when the company started and we started also doing it out of necessity, I realized, wait a minute, this is like a superpower that I have.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a grant writer. That's not a business line on my website, but it is a value that we bring to our clients because we just, when they succeed, we succeed, right? Our goal is to give them a physical project, and that requires getting money from. And most of the projects we do are so different that there's not a pot of money just sitting there waiting for it to appear.
Yeah.
Listen, we can use some of that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, beyond just the grant writing, you understand the system from such a young age. I think that's so valuable, Yeah.
And it's interesting the way that it's shown up in your B Corp certification process, right? So for listeners who aren't super familiar with how it works, there's a couple of different categories of points. One is operational, and that's sort of how you run your business. But the other, there's a category called impact business models. And those really are not impact as a byproduct of your business. They are impact at the core of why you're in business. And, Adre has a lot of them, a lot of them. And at first I was because sometimes clients, think they have a lot. And I'm like, all right, well, let's bring it back. Eliezer had a painful experience with that. And then also thinking about the documentation and proof of them. And I was a little nervous after our first session going through it I was like, all right, guys, this is okay. Maybe not quite so many. And then kind of digging into it, the way that every one of your projects is truly an impact business model has been so inspiring. And, the things that you call the side hustles, right, turned out to be impact business models at the core of why you're in business. And so there's just so much alignment there that's been really, really awesome to see.
Mm-hmm. And even the word impact business models, we don't use that word, but the intent is for each of our projects to be a catalytic business model.
Yeah.
So it's not weirdly not surprising that works. Because I was I have a client, Parrot Creek Child and Family Services. That's a residential treatment facility for teenage boys. We're trying to do the nation's best project in that area, thinking about trauma-informed design, how can we be the best in that category? And then so on and so forth, affordable homeownership for the Black community, an artist in residence for Black and Indigenous artists. They're each different, almost like different product types or different areas. And each one has a different opportunity to kind of go beyond what is considered normal, if that makes sense. So impact is huge.
Yeah. And your grant writing comes in handy for that.
It does.
Yeah, that's what I noticed was you actually have a logic model for each of these. That impresses me for sure. Yeah, it's pretty cool to see. Yeah.
And I have a mission. I was I got to say this because I try to say it every place I go. And I did a building for a foundation, right? And a lot of these grants that we're going for either foundations or government. Unfortunately, a lot of foundations don't give to building projects. They want to give to programs. Mm-hmm. However, how are you going to have programs for residential treatment if you don't have a building? Mm-hmm. How are you going to have an artist in residency if you don't have a building? And then also communities of color are the very ones that don't have the land or the building or the really crappy building that you're now telling community to come inside and this crappy building shows their value. And it's how are people supposed to feel loved, seen, respected, valued when they're coming to a physical space that's not, either for them or, not the best. And that also ties to health equity in thinking about healthy spaces, indoor air quality, all of these things with climate change. So I've been really kind of preaching to get the ear of foundations to think differently about that they give to actual building projects and not just programs.
Is it time for branding?
Oh, yeah. I love branding.
Great.
Branding's the best.
Awesome. Well, you just became a client.
Yes.
So we're really, really, really excited. I'm not just very excited to be working with you. We haven't started.
No.
So I'm actually...
Well, we have today.
Right
now. But I'm actually going to take a few moments just to get my work going with the strategy piece that we typically do. And one of the questions that we always ask, especially... one of the things that I will be working very hard towards is how do we elevate your why, your how, these measures and things that you're going to be tracking, how do we elevate that at the brand level? How do we talk about those things? So if this is a 3-hour session that I'm going to try, we're just going to fire them out. Why do you do this?
Why? That's a really deep question.
It is. Love it.
I have like personal, professional
Sure.
whys, so many whys, right? But at the end of the day, I'm a Christian. And I think the true calling of a Christian is to take care of people and the planet. And so I never really thought about that till I was talking to a journalist who was just having like a real getting to the why, the deep why, and I never related my spirituality really to my, it's like my spiritual side and my business side. But really at the end of the day, that's what we're supposed to be doing, is take care of people and take care of the planet, which is the sustainability. So I think that is always there. And then I have the life experiences, right, of seeing people, but you have to have the empathy when you see people, right? And a lot of people in the city of Portland currently do not have empathy toward seeing people on the street. They just see it as a get it out of my sight. I don't want to see it, make it disappear, not like the humanity of it. And so trying to always stay dialed to the humanity of the things that we do and the communities that we serve. That's the why.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
We're recording
My company is not a religious company. That is not. But you're talking personally for me, what has motivated me throughout the years.
Yeah. Because that's going to bleed into the business some way or another, the humanity that you're trying to bring to the work. There should be a difference visually in how you talk. For example, your tone and voice is probably very accessible, very human. You talk like most people talk, likely, so.
And that's something I actually bring into my volunteer work that I do is breaking down barriers for language.
Yes.
Because a lot of the fields I'm in are in even the land use work that I do.
Right.
Lots of acronyms, government work I do, lots of acronyms, and people can't, how are you going to do public participation in that? So I'm all about the simplest way to explain something.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a
kid's book.
Yeah.
Kids book. That's what I think we should. I think that actually is like more smart and more intellectual.
Yes.
If you can do that.
I
agree.
understand what real estate development is for the first time with that.
I know. I agree.
So second question, how? And we've been talking about it and swimming around it, but if you were to what are the things that Adre is going to focus on to make sure that your purpose is achieved?
Yeah. What I like about the company and what the work I did prior, the Framework Project, the Tallwood Project, the Meyer Memorial, is each of those was an exploration in doing better. So I don't think the field is not figured out yet. And I like I told you, I just went to this impact investing meeting, which I'm getting into that world now. And they were like, oh, it just started not that long ago. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that. Right. So the things I've been on have always been, and the mass timber movement have been very on the bleeding edge. So I think we'll come up with criteria. We'll come up with all that kind of stuff, but that's going to change. The next project we're going to invent the next thing, and the next project we're going to invent the next thing. So in some ways, that's our I don't know, value add, or how you would explain it, is that the ability to be intellectually curious.
Yes.
Bring in the right partners to form collaborations to explore new topics. So whatever I know this year, it's going to be way better next year and the next year after.
Yeah.
So I'm not so stuck on this is how we do it. I'm like, this is how we do it now.
Right. And then lastly, you see, you got this. 3 hours. You just gave it to me in like 5 minutes.
Distillation.
Yeah. What? So it's development.
Yeah.
But there's all these side gigs,
Yes.
as you call them, that you're also doing. So what are some of the kind of foot on the ground practices that you will be doing as you run the business to make sure that you achieve your why?
Yeah. Foot on the ground practices. I think, I don't know if this is, there's we're always debating because there's the project level and then there's the business level, right?
Yes.
And so on the project level, I feel like that is what we're developing checklists for. So when we say equitable outcomes, what do we mean literally? And that's the hard part that development hasn't defined yet. And that's where I was saying I've been on a couple exercises of trying to create scorecards around that. So that's on the environmental sustainability. That's a little more easy because you were like, oh, I get this certification, I do this thing. Right, that's a little more easy. Resilience is a big thing of mine now, and climate resilience to earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, heat domes, fires, right? And then when it comes to the bit, so we're so focused on the projects. And so that's why I'm doing B Corporation certification is then what does it mean, like literally for the business, which it makes our head turn around all the time because we're like, are we talking about Adre or are we talking about the projects?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. It does. It does. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having
Thanks
me.
for, there's just so much here. And we can't wait. Well, I can't wait to be working with you.
Yes.
And
It's really fun.
It is really fun.
yeah.
Her team's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate
you.
you. Well, that's it, y'all. Thank you for joining us. You can get the episode show notes and transcript on our website, sunnybrandspodcast.com.
If you have ideas or suggestions about any companies you'd like for us to take a look at and dissect, you can drop us a line at hello@sunnybrandspodcast.com. And if you want to learn more about the Impact Collective and all of the things that we do to help companies live out their purpose, you can find more information at theimpactcollectivepdx.com.